Good evening, Red Star Rebels. It's St. Valentine's Day, February 14th, 2023. And I guess tonight, all our little candy hearts say, will you be my Red Star Rebel? This is podcast 3 of season 3. And we are Red Star Report. I'm Hal G. Lohr, and this is Voices for the California Nation.
I have a feeling we're dealing with a faceless enemy. It's reminiscent of television in its early days, when indeed there was certainly a race problem in those days. It wasn't out in the street. It wasn't loud in our ears. It wasn't infesting our gut, our conscious gut, as it is today. But by God, there was anguish amongst minorities then as there is now. Then you assaulted the straw men who were acceptable as minority groups, but not the Negro. Now, consequently, I think the purpose, the point of a dramatic show, which is used as a vehicle of social criticism, is to involve an audience, to show them wherein their guilt lies, or at least indeed their association. But if indeed you talk about a denial of a man putting his garbage can next to yours by virtue of his color, now you're getting into a universal guilt, which they should feel, or at least in part understand, but at least they know that it's an evil, and they will recognize it as such.
Let's talk about critical race theory. Speaking as a Californian, I'm pretty aware that California has its own dark history of racial injustice. The Spanish missions, indigenous genocide, anti-Chinese leagues, the Manzanar camp, farm worker exploitation, redlining, the Zoot Suit riot, the Watts riot, the Rodney King riot, the war on gangs, the war on drugs, and much, much more. But can't go into all of them, because time constraints. The point being that with California's evolving progressive values, we at least see our nation state's history, recognize the bad things there, and know in our souls that it's wrong to whitewash history. Because history can't be changed just because it's ignored, and history in itself is neither good nor bad. We don't see history as a personal indictment. It's a record, a tool for learning where we must acknowledge the truth of the past, all the injuries, injustices, and mistakes, so they can be addressed and corrected for a better future for everyone. Something most Californians recognize without the need for a lot of emotional investment. On the other hand, I guess conservative America disagrees with that philosophy. Enter the 1619 Project by New York Times author Nikole Hannah-Jones. A book offering a re-examination and college course study of the legacy of slavery in America and forming a basis for what we know as critical race theory. Critical race theory states U.S. social institutions like the criminal justice system, education system, labor markets, housing market, and the healthcare system contain racism embedded in laws, regulations, rules, and procedures that lead to differential outcomes by race. Full stop. As a modern, progressively minded person, I see nothing offensive in a statement of undeniable truth. As a Californian, I have to ask, wouldn't Red State America's anti-CRT policies suffocating the long overdue American conversation about racial injustice make any hope of equitable U.S. democracy impossible? Media outlets like Fox News regularly demonize critical race theory to scare people who just can't recognize the truth about America's racist history in the institutional racism we see across the USA today, which is a glaring example of American white supremacy, using the privilege of mass media access to angrily assert that the real purpose of CRT is some plot to shame white people and denounce American greatness. That alone would be comically ironic if it wasn't screaming USA, USA while we all watch American democracy die. Because today's alt-right American conservative can't separate their individual identity from America's identity as an institution. They see calling out America's racist past as calling them racist personally, a split personality disorder that shows both how embedded racism is in the red state American identity and how grievance-driven that red state American identity is if those people take offense to being called racist, even as the USA marches politically right and into fascism's embrace. What we have are red state Americans who might have recognized America's racist past, but have now absolved themselves with the false narrative that today's America is now somehow an equitable, racism-free republic. A republic built by venerated slave-owning founding fathers, a nation ordained by their own version of a blue-eyed God to be inarguably a white, Christian, capitalist, righteous military empire, bestest country on earth. We speak English here now forever. Amen. Critical race theory was simply intended to illuminate a moral responsibility, to do something about how racism still impacts people today. But in today's divisive America, it's had a much more far-reaching and opposite effect. Even though Martin Luther King has been gone for 50 years, and even as Black History Month hits its midpoint, a majority of 36 American states are now pushing laws or policies to reassert social regression and racial intolerance. That's happening right now. Florida, Texas, Mississippi, Idaho, Oklahoma, Tennessee, Iowa, Montana, Georgia, Utah, Kentucky, Alabama, Virginia, New Hampshire, North Carolina, South Carolina, Arizona, and North Dakota have already passed legislation banning any institutional CRT discussion that the U.S. is inherently racist, as well as any discussion about racial bias, privilege, discrimination, or even oppression. Game over. Because with an openly partisan Christo-fascist Supreme Court ready to protect them, conservative red state legislatures across America continue to roll back racial progress regarding everything from voting rights to police reform, passing laws forbidding any teaching that might question America's greatness by even mentioning racism in American history and the institutionally oppressive race relations in today's United States. In Florida, books like The Color Purple by Alice Walker and Beloved by Toni Morrison are now banned from school libraries for racially criticizing U.S. history and policy. In Texas, lawmakers seek to replace the word slavery with the term involuntary relocation in school textbooks to ensure white students won't feel uncomfortable. In Mississippi, the Republican-controlled State House voted on Tuesday to create a separate court system and an expanded police force in the capital of Jackson to allow white state officials to appoint judges and prosecutors instead of allowing that city's majority black population to actually elect them. In Georgia, the governor actually called teaching about systemic racism anti-American, as Georgia's Board of Education passed a resolution opposing the mention of slavery as an economic backbone in the founding of the United States. All anti-critical race theory scapegoating moves being made in red states to renormalize American racism and what everyone knows could become national policy in the next few years and take a generation or two at least to fight. For Californians, this means standing up for truth and equality and our own California progressive values in the California State House, with our school boards, and in our own local city halls before America goose steps in to cancel them. It means that even though the 1619 Project itself didn't actually refer to California, we as Californians recognize institutional injustice in our own history, how American racism migrated to our nation state and the evil it's infused into modern California's own racial laws and policies, and fight to change them. We bring the fight home. where our California votes still count. We press Sacramento for laws and policies to nullify American hate and protect California communities. And we don't ignore America's rush to a fascist future, like Americans are trying to ignore their racist past. This is Voices for the California Nation with Hal G. Lohr for the hashtag New Cal Exit podcast, Red Star Report, as heard on KPFK 90.7 Los Angeles, Rebel Alliance News. So first up, we start with a short offering from Red Star Rising with Matt Owen, as he talks about a problem with the growing left unity slate and his decision to join the California National Party. Let's go hear what Matt has to say.
Hello everyone. Today I've returned to the home of Don Jose Castro, first president of the Independent Republic of Alta California, to reflect a bit on my decision to switch parties from Peace and Freedom to California National Party. I recently attended a Zoom conference, Suds, Snacks, and Socialism, the S word that shortly thereafter was condemned bipartisanly by the U.S. Congress. And it was rather startling, to say the least. On the one hand, Howie Hawkins, the Green presidential candidate, U.S. presidential candidate, endorsed by the Left Unity slate, disclosed that he is pro-war and pro-NATO. This drew objections from many people in Peace and Freedom, as well as some Greens. But he plowed ahead, basically preventing the Left Unity slate from taking a strong or any sort of anti-war, anti-imperialist stance, a direct betrayal of the ideas of peace and freedom, and by extension of the entire Left Unity slate. There were objections raised, and my wasn't just an objection, it was a counter-proposal that PFP, which has never grown out of California, joined the California independence movement. Crickets. They've never responded, ever, to repeated calls to join our movement. I concluded, unfortunately, that they are a party who parties like it's 1968, and it is not. They're not even in the right millennium. They are totally averse to new ideas of any sort. Definitely averse to California independence. Having concluded that, and their inability to resist dragging the Left Unity slate into the pro-NATO, pro-war column, I switched parties to California National Party. I will do the same work with them as I was trying to do with PFP. Just because the U.S. has declared itself to be anti-socialist doesn't mean we should in our movement. As a matter of fact, it means the opposite. We should declare ourselves to be pro-democracy and anti-fascist unambiguously. And I intend to see to it that happens now as an integrante of the California National Party. From the home of Don Jose Castro, first president of the Independent Republic of Alta California. Viva Gran California Libre.
Thank you, Matt. That was Red Star Rising with Matt Owen, illustrating a talking point that the California independence movement has been making for years when it comes to progressive causes and California values. A little statement that goes, any activism or movement that tries to fix America but rejects the option of California independence has already accepted failure as a viable option for the people of California. Watch this space.
Aro, can you tell me how much COVID cash went to CRT? I have to tell you, in Illinois, they received $5.1 billion at an elementary school there that used it for equity and diversity. So it's being used for these things. Can you tell me how much money was given to Drag Queen Story Hour, where men dress up as women and read confusing books to children? Oh, we need to look into this, and I urge you to do that. Bradbury Sullivan LGBT Community Center in Pennsylvania received $16,000 for Drag Queen Story Time from COVID cash. I think this is an issue that needs to be looked into. A lot of this money went to things that it should have never gone to. And I thank you so much, and I yield back the remainder of my time.
Finally, for tonight, Red Star Report is pleased to bring you Book Review California with Sue Hirsch. Part 2 of last week's interview with award-winning author, poet, humorist, union activist, publicist, and former 2013 political candidate Dan McCrory. And his book, Capitalism Killed the Middle Class, 25 Ways the System is Rigged Against You. So right now, Red Star Report presents Book Review California with Sue Hirsch.
What have we not yet covered?
There's something called the Powell Memo. Are you familiar with that? Lewis Powell was a lawyer, and his claim to fame up to this point had been that he argued for the tobacco companies in front of the Supreme Court, saying that tobacco was non-addicting. In 1971, a friend of his, who is high up in the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, came to him and said, we're tired, big business is tired of all these hippies and all these returning Vietnam vets coming back saying that the only reason we're still in Vietnam is because we're making money hand over fist, which happened to be true. So they wanted to shut down any kind of dissension on the war in Vietnam. So Powell wrote this 19-page memo where he gave them a step-by-step approach to taking over the conversation and shutting up all those hippies and the Vietnam vets who dared to speak out against the Vietnam War and capitalism itself. What this has done has been very effective. It's they created think tanks like the something called ALEC, which is the American Legislative Exchange Council, where they actually create templates of laws that they want passed by local legislatures, and they take it to somebody who's real pro-business and have them put their name on it as their law, and then they get it passed, and then they create this environment where the law can then be used created in other states, and then eventually move to the halls of Congress and become a federal law. We've been hurt by that. I knew how effective the Powell Memo was when I had a handyman at my house one day, and he said, unions have ruined this country. And I thought, where did he get an idea like that? And I realized the Powell Memo. So what I've done is I've created the McCrory Memo or the McCrory Manifesto, because I'm the only one talking about it. I put the Powell Memo verbatim in my book, and I read it, and everybody that I've talked to about the book, I suddenly realized that the answer to bringing back the conversation to working folks is by gutting their memo, putting in working people and unions where it says business, and basically stealing their memo back from them, because we already know it works. It's been very effective for the last 50 years. It was so effective. Nixon was so impressed with Powell, he appointed him to the Supreme Court. Reagan took the Powell memo, printed it up, and gave copies to his cabinet members. Every Republican president since Nixon has followed the tenets of this Powell memo. So if we can take that memo, make it our own, then 50 years from now, people will be saying, what do working people want?
When we send our people to war, we lie to them in order to get them to go and to believe that they're doing something noble by fighting for us in other countries, when what's really at stake is the corporate interests, and the bottom line of any corporate interest is money.
Yeah, countries that we go to don't see us as some kind of force for good. They see us as invading their country, and that's definitely not the message we should be sending out there. During World War II, we had the moral high ground, and we lost it after World War II.
World War II may be the one and only war in our history, in my opinion, where we actually had some moral high ground. And I think before that, we didn't have it when we actually invaded and colonized the Americas. That's where we lost our moral high ground. High ground was right there in the very beginning when we first started coming to the Americas from other countries, including Europe.
What's interesting about that is a lot of people were very upset, especially Italians, when we changed Columbus Day to Indigenous Peoples Day. But they've looked at the diaries that were kept by Christopher Columbus when he first came into the Americas. And one of the things he said was, the natives here are so friendly and accepting and wonderful, and they'll make good slaves.
So the Italians got upset about this because Columbus was said to be an Italian, and now we're tearing down all the statues. Is that their reasoning?
Yeah, Columbus actually was Italian. He got his funding, though, from the Queen of Spain. So I know that I was in the Bahamas, and Bahamas is one of the places where he landed, and there are no native indigenous people there anymore because of what happens.
There's a lot of confusion about, I think, about where Columbus landed. The upshot that I heard was that we don't actually have proof as to where they really landed originally.
From what I understand, Columbus landed in what's known as Hispaniola, and so that's in the Caribbean. So, well, there's been so many myths taught to kids from the very beginning about George Washington and the cherry tree and all these different things they're all myths. They're not really based on reality. And in fact, a guy named Howard Zinn wrote a book called People's History of the United States, and a lot of people have not read that book, and they really should, because it'll open your eyes. Back to something I was going to bring up with my book, and that's there's another thing called the Project 1033, or the 1033 Project. And that was also something out of the Nixon White House, because in order to fight the war on drugs, which is what he started, he determined that the Department of Defense should offer to local law enforcement some of their surplus at bargain basement prices. So where we, back in the day before all this, we had one or two SWAT teams. We now have SWAT teams in just about every major city in the United States. And that has allowed, for instance, the LA Unified School District has purchased something like 61 AR-14 rifles and 3 grenade launchers. And they don't come with instructions, and they don't come with training. So it's kind of scary to think about some high school teacher launching a grenade.
You mentioned this in your book in one of
Yes.
your 25 chapters, that this is how another way in which the system is rigged against us, that the police forces now have all these weapons and we're trying to arm our teachers.
The whole system is being used in ways that were not intended. Again, intended consequences. For instance, the LA Sheriff's Department bought 50 pairs of snowshoes. I don't know if you know the area that well, but I don't think we have any really need for snowshoes. So
We're in temperate California here.
exactly.
When do we get snow? I think the last time we had snow, I was 6 years old.
California has definitely gotten overdeveloped, and that's another part of the problem is housing and homelessness are so endemic to California now. But to tell you the truth, if I was homeless, California is where I'd want to be because it's, like you said, fairly temperate here, and you're not going to freeze to death like you would in Minnesota or a locale like that. So one of the things that we need to do is attack that problem in a way that we can make a serious dent in the crisis of homelessness. A lot of those people are out on the street for no fault of their own. May have been one catastrophic illness in the family that took all their money. And it's for that particular chapter, I interviewed a friend who had been homeless 3 times, and he said people never think it's going to be a permanent condition. They get a storage unit, put all their stuff in that, and say that'll be there when things turn around. And then once they lose that, they know that there's no way back out of that situation.
Yeah, and so you've mentioned this in your book, that this is another way in which the system is rigged against us. It's very difficult to get housing. You have to wait like at least a year on this waiting list in the hands of your social service agent. Yeah, this is a way, and it has a lot to do, I think, with gentrification and the housing prices just being so high that people can't afford to rent even just a small apartment. And we don't make enough use of creative problem solving like is seen in other countries.
Well, I can tell you that here in California, there's something called Costa-Hawkins. It's a brilliant idea, and I think we should do it. Costa-Hawkins, however, limits the amount of Section 8 housing you can have, which would be really helpful for people who aren't students who are trying to live in dignity. Most of the houses that are available for rental in the state of California are owned by a couple of corporations. A lot of people think, oh, it's some doctor who bought an extra rental units to make some money in retirement. Mm-hmm. That's not usually the case. It's this company called Blackstone, I believe, that owns something like 80 or 90% of rental homes that are out there that are available. And the Costa-Hawkins Act, as I said, keeps Section 8 at bay, and so they can make a top dollar on their rentals rather than be subsidized so that people can move into them.
Right.
And that's another way that California needs to fix things. I have a friend who is head of something called the Coalition for Economic Survival, and he's been fighting Costa-Hawkins since it came about in the 70s. So the fight goes on.
Abandoned business buildings and other abandoned places should be used for housing. We should kind of upcycle them into housing and other business places, because we continually seem to build new housing and new offices when there are so many that are just abandoned that we could be using in the meantime.
Yeah, there's a company out there who's saying that business the way it's handled now is not sustainable. that we need to look at ways to rather than continual growth, look at ways that we utilize what we have now to feed people, to provide that kind of housing that you're talking about. And I mean, there's still business opportunities out there. We just have to retool and redirect those resources.
And is there a takeaway message that you feel strongly that you want your readers to have once they've read this book?
The union movement, the labor movement, can be our saving grace. Maybe not the way it currently exists. There's too much top down, I think, in a lot of cases. I would like to see folks come up in the movement and push us in the right direction. Too often, the labor movement has been has upheld the status quo rather than be the agent of change that we need to make things better for working people.
I absolutely agree. Back to your book, can you tell us where to get a copy of your book?
Well, it's being revamped right now as we speak, but I'm trying to revise it to bring it up to date. It's been out for 3 years, but and I still get calls, and you'd be amazed at how many calls I get every week from corporations that want to update it or take it to a book fair, those kinds of things. It's available anywhere books are sold online. It's not so much in stores. I've gotten to my local Barnes & Noble, that's pretty much it as far as on the shelf. So you could go to Barnes & Noble, you could go to, I hate to say this, Amazon, and order the book, or you can contact me because I just ordered 100 copies of myself, and I'm going to undercut Amazon by a few dollars, but that way you get a signed copy too.
Excellent. Can you very slowly recite your contact information for us?
The best way to reach me if you want to order a book is at my email address, which is writingbiz, WRITINGBIZ @yahoo.com.
Well, thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you, Sue.
I'm Sue of Book Review California on Red Star Report podcast, and you've been listening to Dan McCrory, author of Capitalism Killed the Middle Class, 25 Ways in Which the System is Rigged Against You. Back to you, Hal. Thank you so much for your help.
Thank you, Sue. That was part 2 of Capitalism Killed the Middle Class, 25 Ways the System is Rigged Against You, an interview with author Dan McCrory. For more information or to purchase this book, you can go to Amazon.com, and we'll furnish that link in the description below. That's it for podcast number 3 of our 3rd season. And if you're still watching, thank you as always. For more Red Star Report information, check out our website at redstarreport.com. Subscribe to our Red Star Report YouTube channel. Please go to our Red Star Report Facebook page, Twitter, and Instagram, and give us a like. Give us a follow. Because if you want to support the real California Independence Movement Media Group, it's all about the algorithms. Our thanks to all our Red Star Rebels for watching. Happy Valentine's Day. We are Red Star Report.